Jill Valentine was born in 1974 and during her early life was a part of the United States Army Delta Force training program. After she was recruited by Albert Wesker to join STARS Alpha Team in 1998, Jill took part in the infamous Mansion incident as one of the few survivors along fellow STARS members Chris Redfield, Barry Burton, and Rebecca Chambers. 2 months later, Jill was stationed in Raccoon City when a T-virus outbreak occurred. During the Raccoon City incident, Jill would be hunted down by the experimental BOW known as Nemesis. Jill would survive her many encounters with Nemesis along with a few other survivors and would escape the city before its destruction. In 2003, Jill would team up once again with her longtime friend Chris Redfield, and together the two would travel to Russia and would destroy the last secret facility owned by Umbrella. After the fall of Umbrella, she along with Chris Redfield and 9 other members would create the BSAA. Over the next 3 years, the BSAA would operate across the world, taking down all the Umbrella's old rival companies. However, in 2006, Jill and Chris were investigating Oswald E. Spencer's residence, and it was there that the two would encounter and engage their All Stars team leader, Albert Wesker. The two were easily defeated, but before Wesker could deliver the final killing blow to Chris Redfield, Jill would tackle Wesker through the window and the two would fall into a deep crevice. After the BSAA spent 3 months searching for Jill's body, she was declared dead on November 29, 2006. However, Jill had not died in the fall, but had been recovered by Albert Wesker and was experimented on for 3 years in order to help him create the Ouroboros virus. In 2009, Jill's longtime partner, Chris Redfield, was on a mission with fellow BSAA agent Sheva Alomar to prevent the outbreak of the Ouroboros virus. During their mission, the two would encounter the now mind-controlled Jill Valentine, and Jill would attack Chris and Sheva, but thanks to Jill's memories, this gave Chris and Sheva the opening they needed to remove the mind-controlling device off of Jill's chest. After Chris and Sheva had moved on to stop Wesker, Jill would be encountered by fellow BSAA agent Josh, and that together, the two of them would reunite with Chris and Sheva, and giving them a pair of RPGs would deliver the final killing blow to Wesker, bringing his reign of terror to an end. Jack Krauser was born in 1976 and over the course of his life showed a profound interest in being a soldier. He was an experienced United States Army soldier and mercenary and led many successful operations and was overall a first-class soldier who took pride in his capabilities. Krauser's extensive military service and wealth of experience led him to become a Special Forces member under the United States SOLCOM unit. In 2002, Krauser received an order to participate in a mission to South America to investigate a link between the Umbrella Corporation and the drug lord Javier Hidalgo. During the mission, Krauser would be partnered with United States government agent Leon S. Kennedy, and upon reaching the rendezvous point in the local village, Krauser encountered BOWs for the first time. However, he remained fearless and demanded Leon to share everything he knew about them, and it was during this conversation that Krauser would first learn about Albert Wesker. During the mission's conclusion, Krauser would be injured in his left arm and due to his injuries was forced to retire. During his retirement, Krauser began to admire the use of biological weapons, having seen firsthand their power that they could wield and how they could exceed that of any normal human. Krauser began to have ambitions to acquire the power of BOWs for himself, and to do this, he secretly faked his own death, and it was shortly after this event that he would first meet and encounter Albert Wesker himself. In 2004, Krauser would be ordered by Wesker to infiltrate the Las Luminadas cult in Europe to recover a sample of the dominant species Las Plagas. In order to gain the trust of the cult's leader, Lord Sadler, Krauser had to kidnap the president's daughter Ashley Graham. After getting access to the inner circle of the cult, Krauser took a sample of Las Plagas for himself and injected himself, now gaining the superhuman abilities he sought. After this, Wesker would send Ada Wong in order to retrieve another sample of Las Plagas, and it was during this time that Krauser would encounter his old partner, Leon S. Kennedy. Ordered to kill Leon by both Wesker and Sadler, Krauser would engage Leon in combat but would be defeated. Despite being injured, Krauser would go on to hunt down Ada Wong but would be killed by her in the process. Following the incident, Krauser's corpse was recovered by Wesker, and the dead Plaga specimen within his body was successfully cloned and aided in the development of Wesker's plans with Tri-Cell organizations. Well, what's up again, guys? Brian here at 3TR, here to present my second Versus Series matchup for my second season, and this time we got ourselves a good old-fashioned battle of the sexes, as I will be pitting the toughest female character in the Resident Evil franchise, Jill Valentine, against the equally impressive and corrupted soldier in Jack Krauser. So without further ado, it's time to compare and contrast, and we shall begin by comparing them physically. For this particular matchup, I'll be using Jill as she was during the events of Resident Evil Revelations 1. During that time, Jill was a middle-aged female at the age of 39, standing 5'6" inches tall, and Jill has shown immense upper and lower body strength. She was able to catch herself falling into a chasm with one hand, performing a muscle-up with little effort, and she can fire multiple shots from high-powered weapons like magnums with only one arm. Her agility and lower body strength is almost unrivaled as well, with her processing the ability to stand forward flips onto enemies' shoulders before snapping their necks and diving away and doing backflips from the knees position while recovering from double knee drops. Her reflexes and speed are immensely well developed, with her being able to disarm Barry in a fraction of a second and quickly being able to dodge many attacks from BOWs. In Resident Evil 3, she was even able to jump off a car, transition into a horizontal wall jump into a mini skirt and boots. Jill's durability is also immensely high. She has been thrown around by Nemesis, been knocked on her ass by Wesker with his superhuman strength, and has powered through dozens of physical strikes from various BOWs over the course of her life and has recovered rather quickly. In my opinion, Jill Valentine is by far the toughest female protagonist character in the Resident Evil franchise. By the time of his death in 2004, Krauser was a 28-year-old human male standing exactly 6 feet tall and was built like a linebacker. He was very muscular, and prior to his allegiance to Albert Wesker, Krauser's early military training kept him in extremely good shape. He possessed great stamina and endurance and was highly tolerant to pain. He was very muscular with a solid upper build, and when he injected himself with the Las Plagas parasite, all of his physical properties were greatly enhanced. Krauser was granted superhuman strength and speed, and his enhanced speed was so heightened that it granted him reflexes capable of dodging bullets and rockets. He could jump exceptionally long distances, and his physical durability was beyond superhuman. This is a guy who could take a magnum to the face and keep on going as if not affected at all. Krauser is one opponent you don't want to run into unprepared. When it comes to physical capabilities, there really is no contest here. As a woman, Jill is in as best physical condition as she could possibly be for the trials of combat, but Krauser simply outclasses Jill in every possible way. He's taller, bigger, stronger, faster, and can take far more punishment, and it's for these reasons that I give Jack Krauser the decisive edge in physical capabilities. Jill Valentine, being in the Delta Force program, has learned to use and become proficient with a variety of firearms. Her aim is extremely accurate, evident by her being able to land a headshot on a Mangini from 2,000 plus yards away from a moving helicopter. It is said that while she does suffer from increased recoil due to her not having as much strength as her partner, due to her Delta Force training, her accuracy is unrivaled. Jill's hand-to-hand combat ability is impressive, with her body officially described as small but muscular, and her fighting is said to be highly honed. She compensates for her relatively slight stature in comparison to her male counterparts with her immense speed and flexibility when fighting, favoring the use of kicks and grapples over her fists. She tends to use a lot of acrobatics in her moves, with many of her melee attacks featuring flips and cartwheels. With a knife, Jill is extremely proficient as well. Contrary to most characters, Jill's favor to stabbing motions with her blade rather than slashing, featuring a small radius of attacks, but allows her to attack slightly faster than the other characters. Krauser was a highly skilled unarmed combatant, both unarmed and when armed was an extremely ferocious knife fighter. Krauser was put through the same form of training as Leon S. Kennedy, which required both of them to be very tactically flexible and have a wide variety of skills with firearms and heavy ordnance. Krauser was also an exceptional archer, preferring to use his own personal customized bow as his main weapon. Unlike Leon, however, who mainly relied on quick thinking and acrobatic maneuvers, Krauser's form was more based off of him taking advantage of his sheer brute force and taking down his opponents with a sort of Rambo-like mentality to overwhelm his opponents, or, when possible, could easily rely on stealth tactics to catch his opponents off guard. When Krauser was injected with the Las Plagas parasite, he was granted a few special abilities to go alongside his own personal martial training. He physically could mutate his arm into becoming a gigantic blade arm, which was not only capable of being able to cleave opponents into pieces, but could also be used as a metallic shield which could protect him from all projectiles from the knees up, somewhat like a riot shield. He could also use his blade arm to execute a powerful forward charge thrust, capable of literally ripping people apart to the point where it looked like as if they exploded. And a whole, as a humanoid mutated combatant, he is a serious powerhouse, second only to the one and only Albert Wesker. When it comes to martial skills as soldiers, Krauser and Jill seem to have primary advantages over the other. In terms of up-close fighting, Krauser would clearly have the advantage due to his physicality and ferocity as a combatant. However, Jill would clearly have the advantage at a distance, being the much better marksman while being able to use firearms, which are best used at long distances, but has been proven that she can be just as effective and accurate when using them at close range, regardless of which firearm she is carrying at the time. However, an X factor for this category is the use of Krauser's blade arm and its effectiveness it will have against Jill. There is no question that at close ranges, Krauser could use this weapon to maximum effect. However, Jill has had experience against up-close weapon-wielding opponents before, and certainly has the skill set to respond. Along with the arm, when used as a shield, is an effective defensive tool. It does have an opening that Jill would certainly be able to spot and take advantage of to gain the advantage. However, as opposed to all other up-close wielding opponents that Jill has encountered, I do not believe that she has encountered an opponent that could use such a weapon so effectively and precisely as Krauser will be with his blade arm, and Jill has suffered from not being able to respond to threats effectively when first encountered, and requires time in order to formulate a plan, then respond. What this comes down to is whose advantages matter the most. Jill's ability to keep Krauser at a distance for a time, or Krauser's ability to overwhelm Jill with no restraint. And unfortunately, when it comes down to how these two have developed their skill sets in a fight like this, it is clear that Jill is at a serious disadvantage. A fight like this would clearly start off as a long distance fight at first, and although Krauser is not as good as a marksman as Jill, he is skilled enough with his range of weapons to at least keep up with Jill. However, Krauser's stealth-like training would allow him to close the distance and turn this into a close quarters fight, and Jill simply cannot hold her own against Krauser once the fight got to that point. If she to have fought Krauser before he was enhanced, then she certainly would have had a much easier time fighting him, as his skill set will more or less be at the same level, if not slightly above Chris Redfield's close quarters fighting skill level during the events of Resident Evil 6. But this much more enhanced Krauser is a completely different animal who, thanks to his own skill set and advanced physical capabilities, would be able to take everything Jill could throw at him at a distance, but once the fight got to hand combat, Jill would have little to no chance of holding Krauser off, and it's for these reasons that I'm giving Jack Krauser the edge in martial skills and abilities. For this matchup, I'll be taking Jill's armament as it was from the Mercenaries game mode of Resident Evil 5. Her primary weapons are the H&K MP5 machine gun with an effective firing range of 100 yards, which carries a magazine of 150 rounds, and which also carries an extra magazine of another 150 rounds in reserve. She also carries a standard issue Beretta PX4 handgun with an effective firing range of 50 yards, and also carries a magazine clip of 50 rounds with an extra 2 clips in reserve. Her primary knife model is not confirmed in any source. However, from the few images that I could find of it, I do believe that it would most likely have been an S37N SEAL Team knife, which overall length is about 14 inches overall, with the blade itself measuring at about 8 inches. She also carries at least 5 flash grenades, which are used to cause momentary distractions and disorientate opponents. For this matchup, Krauser would be bringing 4 weapons into this contest. His primary long-range weapon was his own personal custom compound bow with an effective killing range of about 60 yards, in which it was fitted to be able to fire both standard arrows along with arrows that had a small explosive charge, in which he carried a hoister of about 30 arrows which could be used for either use. For his medium-range weapon, he'll be carrying a standard TMP, which was a full auto submachine gun which had a firing speed of 0.10 seconds and carried a magazine of about 30 rounds, in which Krauser could also carry at least 3 extra clips in reserve. His primary weapon for close-range engagement was his personally designed hunter's knife, which was measured at about 18 inches and the blade itself measuring about 12 inches of a sharpened steel. Krauser also carried at least 4 flash grenades, which could be used to mostly cover his retreat at close ranges. When comparing Jill and Krauser's armament against each other, it is clear that both combatants are fully equipped to handle combat at all possible ranges. If we simply go down the list, when comparing Jill's H&K machine gun to Krauser's compound bow, at long ranges Jill's H&K has a much more effective firing range and she carries more ammunition for it, but Krauser's compound bow has multiple uses. At close range, Jill's Beretta PX4 handgun is a much more accurate weapon, but Krauser's TMP has a much higher firing rate and has more ammunition. Krauser's personal knife completely outclasses Jill's standard issue S37N SEAL Team knife, while between the two of them, Jill carries 1 extra flash grenade. I will be awarding the very slight edge to Jill Valentine due to the fact that it has been stated that out of all main protagonists in the Resident Evil franchise, Jill Valentine has the best shot. This means that she might be able to use her H&K and Beretta PX4 more effectively than Krauser's compound bow and TMP. She might be completely outclassed in terms of blades, but she also does carry 1 extra flash grenade, giving Jill slightly more effective combative resources. And it is for these reasons I will be giving the very slight edge to Jill Valentine in terms of weapons. Due to Jill's years of training in the Delta Force program and having extensive experience during her time with STARS in the BSAA, it is clear that Jill Valentine is perfectly capable of dealing with just about any threat she encounters head-to-head, whether it's up against a single large opponent or groups of enemies. Jill's several encounters against BOWs shows that Jill is a master of thinking on the spot and using whatever tools she has available to her to take the advantage, whether it's her own personal gear or using the environment itself. Her well-developed skill set leaves her prepared for just about any scenarios. However, one element that is clear when it comes to Jill's effectiveness during missions is that she is much stronger when she fights alongside allies. This has been shown in nearly every single scenario Jill has been a part of, whether it was during the Mansion incident, the Raccoon City outbreak, the Fall of Umbrella, the Tanker incident in Resident Evil Revelations, and her encounters with Wesker and Josh in Resident Evil 5. Jill's main approach in combat was to go head-to-head with her opponents and simply attempt to overwhelm them with offensive force, or to maneuver around a combat area and take advantage of an opponent's weaknesses. Jill's technique is based off the reacting to an opponent instead of actively countering to an opponent's maneuvers. Jill is more or less a tank. She is tough enough to take a hit and immediately rebound, as opposed to someone like Leon S. Kennedy, who does everything in his power to avoid getting hit and can immediately counter and respond. The reason why fighting alongside an ally is such an important factor to Jill's success in combat is that whenever Jill makes a mistake or misses an opportunity, she has had a much easier time to rebound and recover when she has someone to bounce off of. Jill is without question a formidable combatant on her own. However, she has constantly found herself in situations where she's been completely caught off guard, has fallen into numerous traps, and has constantly needed someone else's help in order to survive. And therefore, if any opponent was capable of forcing Jill onto her back foot and keeping her locked in that position and not allow her the time she needs to recover and come up with a new response plan, then Jill would find it almost impossible to fight back effectively. Despite Krauser being an extremely brute force type of combatant at first sight, thanks to his initial training with SOCOM, he was a very clever and foreplanning tactician which relied on stealth maneuvers, surprise attacks, and non-direct approaches to wear down his opponents. Then, once he had successfully worn down his opponents, he would then pounce on them with overwhelming force to bring them down. However, this notion of only relying on non-direct approaches was not Krauser's only combative tactic, as he was fully capable of attempting to engage with an opponent in a straightforward manner if the situation called for it, and Krauser was quite keen at keeping his tactics quite flexible and being able to use the environment itself to his advantage, as shown during his mission to take down the drug lord Javier Hidalgo alongside former ally Leon S. Kennedy in South America. Though, like so many other antagonists in the Resident Evil franchise, Krauser could be very overconfident, and this could result in some sloppy execution in his maneuvers. And Krauser did have a tendency to repeat his attacks, which would undoubtedly make him very predictable at times, leaving him open for retaliation. This verdict is by far the hardest one to call. Between the two, I would have to say that as a tactician, Jill Valentine certainly has more experience, having been through years of different combat scenarios that has forced her to have to think on her feet and formulate a plan to overcome the odds. However, most of these achievements were only possible with the help of her allies. However, Krauser's main approach is much more effective and flexible, being able to take advantage of Jill Valentine's own usual approach to combat, which is to go head-to-head with her opponent in an attempt to maneuver around and spot out their weaknesses. But Krauser's overconfidence will certainly leave him open to counterattacks and will certainly make him predictable for a time. Between the two, if I had to choose, I would say that Krauser's tactics, though less focused, are certainly more effective. Jill's greatest achievement as a solo combatant was her victory over the BOW Nemesis. At first, Jill certainly had difficulty combating Nemesis' overwhelming offensive. However, over time she became very used to his encountering Nemesis and became fully prepared to respond to him no matter how many times he appeared. But Jill was only able to achieve victory against Nemesis due to having the ability to take advantage of the environment itself. Had Jill not had that advantage, then Jill never would have had a chance to defeat Nemesis in the first place. Also, as stated earlier, Jill is much more comfortable as a fighter when she fights alongside others. Over Jill's entire career, she has constantly found herself in need of assistance, whether it's falling into traps or other critical situations. And the use of traps and surprise maneuvers is something that Krauser certainly would be able to apply to this engagement. What made Leon a much more suitable combatant for Krauser was not only had they trained alongside each other, but Leon knew Krauser's mindset and how he likes to operate in combat, and his own formidable training required Leon to always be on alert and be able to immediately respond quickly and decisively, allowing his training to be as effective against any opponent. As for Jill, her training and experience in the field was best applied against BOWs and not properly trained opponents who could apply non-direct techniques and can plan ahead by placing Jill in a position of weakness without her knowing it, which is the key element to what led Jill's defeat against Ada Wong in my matchup that I did last year. And her skills as a hand-to-hand combatant are not nearly as developed to allow her to effectively hold off Krauser's own skill level, as she and Chris were completely outclassed when they were engaging Wesker together, and Jill without question would have been at her best. And Krauser is at least one level below Wesker as a martial artist. In conclusion, Jill Valentine is without a doubt a formidable opponent on her own, but in order to take on the toughest combat scenarios possible, she needs to have the aid of specific elements that can affect the outcome of any fight, and she simply will not have any of these advantages to aid her in this engagement. While Krauser does not need any of these advantages or special tactics in order to be just as dangerous and effective in combat. If we were to take both Krauser and Jill and strip them of all their weapons and place them on an even flat plane with nothing to hide behind, then this fight would obviously become a hand-to-hand contest, and against Krauser, this is the one form of combat that Jill has no chance of winning. And even if we gave Jill all of her equipment and had her pick the location, Krauser would simply rely on his own extensive stealth tactics to close the distance fairly quickly and turn this once again into an up-close fight. Jill might be able to cause a momentary distraction with the use of her flash grenades, but all this would do is buy her some extra time. But Krauser would simply re-engage, catch up to Jill, catch her off guard, and again take her down. And it is for these reasons that I give Jack Krauser the edge as a battle tactician. as much as it pains me to admit it, in the end, Jill Valentine is simply walking into the kind of fight she simply cannot win in the long run. Jill's biggest problem is that the only time Jill Valentine will be at any kind of advantage is when she can keep Krauser at a distance, since Jill's own armament and masterful marksman skills will certainly give her a much more effective firing range than Krauser. In the early stages of this fight, there is no question that in a game of who can hit who first at a distance, Jill would have no difficulties hitting Krauser first, and would even be able to disable Krauser's bow and TMP submachine gun, forcing Krauser to have to change up his approach. However, Krauser's own enhanced physicality and his ability to close in the distance easily and quickly would make it virtually impossible for Jill to take advantage of her great effective firing range for a great deal of time. Now, once Krauser is forced to change up the rules of the engagement, he would not go in for a killing blow at first, but instead he would rely on punches, kicks, and precision knife slashes to wear Jill down. Jill, being the tank that she is, would certainly take the hit and recover, and certainly would be able to use her own extremely developed skill set to get a number of good shots and perhaps even a few physical blows of her own, but Krauser would easily be able to take the extra damage and determine Jill's own tactical approach. And once Krauser has figured out all of the intricacies of Jill's methods, Krauser would then adapt his approach once again and begin wearing Jill down even more, and would even begin targeting Jill's weapons. He would cut Jill's H&K machine gun in half of his blade arm, kick her Beretta PX-4 handgun out of Jill's hands, causing Jill to have to fall back and begin relying on using her flash grenades to increase the distance once again to cover her retreat and buy her some extra time to come up with a new plan. But Krauser would be having none of this, and once Krauser was absolutely sure that Jill was weakened down enough and being forced to have to rely on her survival knife, he would then close the distance once more, draw out his own blade for the last time, and using his own better developed knife fighting skills and superior physical dominance would completely overwhelm and end Jill Valentine's life. In Jill's defense, if Krauser were fighting Jill as she was when she was under the control of Albert Wesker in Resident Evil 5, or had the aid of her longtime partner Chris Redfield by her side, then a fight like this would play out very, very differently, as Jill's enhanced strength, speed, and ferocity, or the teamwork that Chris and Jill have developed over countless missions, would certainly be more than enough to give Krauser a serious challenge that even he would have a very difficult time dealing with. Sadly, however, that would not be the case for this time around, and it is for these reasons that I declare Jack Krauser, the fallen soldier, the winner. And that's a wrap. Please remember that this outcome was just my own personal opinion, and feel free to share your own thoughts and opinions in the comments down below. And if you do plan to respond in the comments, please be respectful. And if you like this video, feel free to like and subscribe to keep track of me in my future video content and future versus series matchups. And like always, thank you guys for watching. You're awesome. And here's a sneak preview of my next 3TR versus series matchup.
So you're the boss around here?
No, not just around here. I'm the boss to surpass Big Boss himself. Solid Snake.
I'm a prisoner of death. Only you can free me.